Good morning. It is Monday, October 7th, and on your screen is a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 10:52 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. My name is Jesse Anderson, and I'm the Senior Engineering Manager for Falcon Structures Manufacturing here at SpaceX.
And I'm John Innsbrucker, the Falcon Principal Integration Engineer, joining you from the status desk here just behind Mission Control Hawthorne.
Welcome to our webcast coverage for Hera, the European Space Agency's mission for planetary defense, which was developed as part of a larger international effort known as the Asteroid Impact and Deflection Assessment Collaboration, or ESA. Today will mark this year's 94th launch for SpaceX and the 389th flight overall.
We're just over 19 minutes away from launch. Both the vehicle and the range are green. On the weather front, it's cloudy. It's been a little rainy. The good news right now is we think the weather will hold up and be good to go for launch when we get to T0. Now, if for any reason we have to call a hold on today's launch, a backup opportunity is available tomorrow. That's the 8th of October at 10:46 a.m. Eastern Time.
You may remember the first part of the ESA collaboration, NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART mission that SpaceX launched at the end of 2021, which tested a kinetic impactor technique to deflect asteroids. DART was SpaceX's first interplanetary launch for NASA and the first planetary defense test to see if humanity can change the motion of an asteroid in space. DART collided into a small asteroid moonlet called Dimorphos, which orbits around a larger asteroid called Didymos.
Spacecraft is on internal power.
And that happened in September of 2022, while about 11 million kilometers or 6.8 million miles from Earth. The collision shortened Dimorphos' orbit by 32 minutes, or about 26 times the predefined success threshold of 73 seconds. Hera will now return to the same binary asteroid system to survey the results of the kinetic impact up close and help researchers understand if it can become a repeatable technique among other mission objectives. Now, before we get into today's mission, here's a quick refresher on the DART mission courtesy of NASA.
We're embarking on a new era of humankind.
Didymos and Dimorphos make a great target. We needed an asteroid with a moon that you can see from ground-based telescopes around the world.
We're doing this mission to prove that we can deflect an asteroid.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 and DART on NASA's first planetary defense test to intentionally crash into an asteroid.
Even if we do everything right, our sensors work well, our spacecraft is doing well, even then, we might still miss.
4, 3, 2, 1.
For the first time ever, humanity has changed the orbit of a planetary object.
NASA confirms that DART successfully changed the targeted asteroid's trajectory.
Using the ground-based telescopes around the world to watch the system and see how it's affected by this impact event.
This is a watershed moment for planetary defense and a watershed moment for humanity.
DART changed the orbit of a celestial body for the first time in human history, demonstrating one possible capability to defend Earth from a potential future impact. Hera will visit Dimorphos to measure its mass and makeup, as well as its shifted orbit from up close, performing its own crash scene investigation of the asteroid moon. The data gathered will help validate the DART-style deflection technique for operational use in case it's ever needed to help deflect any dangerous asteroids headed for Earth. Hera is the first planetary defense mission for ESA and will be the first mission ever to perform a subsurface radar survey of an asteroid using the smallest radar instrument ever flown in space. To help complete its mission, Hera is carrying 2 shoebox-sized CubeSats with it, one called Milani and the other called Juventus. Milani was named after the late Italian academic who devised the DART and Hera missions, and Juventus is the Roman name of the daughter of Hera. Hera will help pave the way for ESA's future interplanetary missions by testing deep space navigation and guidance and inter-satellite communication between the main Hera spacecraft and its CubeSats, which are packed with miniaturized technology and scientific payloads. The CubeSats will conduct proximity operations in the asteroid's extremely low gravity environment, flying lower and closer than Hera. And they will actually end their mission by landing on Dimorphos, which is 170 meters wide, or roughly the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Hera is expected to arrive at Dimorphos in late 2026 to begin its 6-month investigation, delivering researchers on Earth critical data about future asteroid deflection missions and continue to grow our understanding of asteroid geophysics and build our knowledge about the formation and evolution of the solar system. With that primer, let's take a look at this video from ESA to dive deeper on today's mission and hear a special message from the ESA Director General.
Hay un misterio en el espacio profundo, y resolverlo hará que la Tierra sea más segura. Por eso la misión Hera de la Agencia Espacial Europea está tomando forma. Para ir a donde una nave espacial en particular ya ha ido antes. El 26 de septiembre de 2022, moviéndose a 6,1 kilómetros por segundo, la nave espacial DART de la NASA se estrelló contra el asteroide Dimorphos. Parte de nuestro sistema solar cambió. El impacto encogió la órbita de Dimorphos, del tamaño de la Gran Pirámide, alrededor de su asteroide progenitor, Didymos, del tamaño de una montaña. También envió una nube de escombros a miles de kilómetros a través del espacio. Este gran experimento se realizó para demostrar que podíamos defender la Tierra contra un asteroide entrante, golpeándolo con una nave espacial para desviarlo. DART tuvo éxito. Pero aún quedan muchas cosas por hacer. Los científicos no saben cuál es la masa y la composición exactas de Dimorphos. ¿Qué le hizo el impacto al asteroide? ¿Qué tamaño tiene el cráter dejado por la colisión de DART? ¿O si Dimorphos se ha roto por completo y se mantiene unido solo por su propia gravedad débil? Por eso volvemos con la misión Hera de la ESA. Después de un viaje de 2 años por el espacio y un sobrevuelo de Marte, Hera entrará en órbita alrededor de Dimorphos y comenzará su investigación del lugar del accidente. Será una tarea peligrosa. El impacto puede haber dejado nubes de escombros flotando en las cercanías del asteroide. Pero Hera no irá sola. Lleva consigo 2 CubeSats del tamaño de un maletín, para acercarse y tomar más riesgos que su nave espacial madre. Uno identificará los minerales que componen Dimorphos, mientras que el otro desplegará una antena de radar para realizar la primera exploración subsuperficial de un asteroide. Y finalizarán sus tareas aterrizando en Dimorphos, para recopilar datos adicionales sobre su superficie y campo gravitatorio. Al final de las observaciones de Hera, Dimorphos se convertirá en el asteroide mejor estudiado de la historia, lo cual es vital, porque si un cuerpo de este tamaño alguna vez chocara contra la Tierra, podría destruir una ciudad entera. Los dinosaurios no tenían defensa contra los asteroides, porque nunca tuvieron una agencia espacial. Pero, a través de Hera, estamos aprendiendo qué podemos hacer para reducir este peligro y hacer que el espacio sea más seguro.
Launching Hera today is Falcon 9, a 2-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. Starting at the top of the vehicle is the payload fairing, a protective shell that encases the payload being sent to space. That fairing will separate and jettison away from the vehicle, exposing the payload once Falcon 9 reaches space. And here you can see on your screen a photo of Hera being encapsulated in that fairing just a few days ago. The fairing halves that we are using today have supported multiple missions, one having flown 12 missions and the other 18. Now, continuing down the vehicle, we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or what we call the MVAC engine, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. And below that is the first stage, which contains 8 engines arranged around one center engine held in place by a structure called the octaweb. Now, each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust. The booster supporting today's mission previously launched 22 missions, including Crew 1 and Crew 2, SXM-8, CRS-23, XP, Transporter 4 and 5, Global Star FM-15, ISS Aero C-3, Korea 425, Maxar-1, ASBM, and 10 Starlink missions. Now, due to the additional performance required to deliver today's payload to an interplanetary transfer orbit, this will be the 23rd and final launch for this booster, and recovery is not planned. However, we will be recovering the fairing halves. So with that, let's check in with John and I for a status update on today's launch.
The launch vehicle and spacecraft are in good health. They're ready for launch as we are just beyond T-minus 9 minutes to liftoff. The Falcon 9 team reported on console at T-minus 2 hours and 15 minutes. They began their final checks of the launch vehicle and ground systems. We did a final checkout of the flight termination system. That was at T-minus 1 hour and 45 minutes. We then had the Falcon 9 team complete their data review of first and second stage propellant checkouts, as well as the avionics team and the guidance, nav, and control team, and they did all their final data reviews at T-minus 1 hour. At that point, the chief engineer conducted a technical readiness poll, and everything was go to continue. We've also completed at T-minus 38 minutes the poll to proceed with propellant load and launch, and most recently, you might have heard over the countdown net, the spacecraft has gone on internal power at T-minus 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, currently, the team at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, they are loading propellant. That began on time at T-minus 35 minutes when our launch auto sequence began. We're loading 2 propellants on Falcon 9 today, a fuel and an oxidizer. Now, for Falcon 9, our fuel is a refined form of kerosene known as RP1. To burn that fuel, we need a source of oxygen, which we call the oxidizer. Now, most burning that you're familiar with on Earth uses oxygen that makes up about 21% of the air you breathe. But in space, there's no atmosphere to provide oxygen or other oxygen-bearing molecules, so rockets need to carry their own. Now, Falcon 9's oxidizer is super chilled liquid oxygen, what we call densified LOX. Now, the liquid oxygen is chilled well below its boiling point. That allows its density to be increased, and that in turn allows us to load more into the first and second stage LOX tanks. And that's an important advantage for missions like today's, where we need as much propellant as we can carry to get to the required interplanetary transfer orbit. Now, currently on the Falcon 9, you see on your screens, fuel loading is complete on the second stage. We're continuing on the first stage up until about T-minus 6 minutes when fuel loading will wrap up on that stage. And we are loading liquid oxygen onto both the first and second stages right now. In addition to its propellants, Falcon 9 also needs an ignition source to start burning that fuel and oxidizer. And for that, we use a liquid called TTEL.
Stage 1, RP1 load is complete.
And there we're on time. Fuel load on the first stage is complete. I mentioned TTEL. That's an acronym for a mouthful called triethyl aluminum and triethyl borane. Now, when we ignite the engines, we first flow liquid oxygen and TTEB into the gas generator in the main combustion chambers. The TTEB will burst into flames in the presence of the oxygen. So once we have that ignition, the RP1 kerosene fuel is introduced and the Merlin engine goes to full power. And at liftoff, Falcon 9's 2 stages that you can see next to the strongback, they will combine to hold over 1.1 million pounds of the fuel and oxidizer propellants. Now, to provide maximum performance for the Hera mission, Booster 1061 will use all of its propellant. We won't save any for the landing of the first stage. On the weather front, you can see on the screen, it's cloudy, it's been a little rainy. We started the day with a 50% probability of violating launch weather constraints, but the good news is that the weather officer forecasts that we should be go 5 minutes from now. Mostly we've been watching thick clouds, make sure they're not too cold, where you might have triggered lightning. The good news is the clouds are warm. Everything looks just pretty much gloomy, a little rainy.
Tanks are pressing.
But with that,
strong back retract.
You hear the tanks are pressing. We're getting ready for strong back retract. So inside T-minus 5 minutes, all systems are go for launch from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. So Jesse, let's head back and watch the last of the countdown.
Thanks, John. It is T-minus 4 minutes and 38 seconds and counting. And as John mentioned, everything continues to look go for liftoff at T0. Now,
strong back retract has started.
Perfect timing. You heard that call out, that strong back retract has begun. Now what's going to happen here is the clamp arms, which are just below the fairing, are going to open up, and once those are fully open, then that strong back, or what we call the TE, or transporter erector, will begin to retract away from the vehicle. And you can see on your screen that those clamp arms are opening up there. Now, the TE is designed to transport, raise, and support Falcon 9 at the launch pad using umbilicals or flexible lines to route the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry from the ground systems to the rocket and the payload until Falcon 9 switches to internal power and clears the pad. And you can see the clamp arms are now fully open, and that strong back, there you can see it on your screen, the TE is now moving slowly away from the vehicle. Now this is going to recline just a few degrees here, but at T0 it's going to move even further away, about 45 degrees away from the vehicle as Falcon 9 lifts off. And there you can see that the TE is pretty much fully reclined there on your screen.
Coming up on T-minus 3 minutes. Strong back is in the countdown configuration. It's about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9. Waiting for next is completion of liquid oxygen loading on the first stage.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Right on time. So at this point in the countdown, the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with the 1.1 million pounds of fuel and liquid oxygen. We have loaded all of the fuel on first and second stage. Liquid oxygen is now complete on the first stage. The last major event will be T-minus 2 minutes when we finish loading liquid oxygen on the second stage. And you can see right there the cold, chilled skin of the second stage. There's the warm Florida air moving by it. We're seeing the condensation of the moisture in the air. Everything continuing to look good as we come up on T-minus 2 minutes.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And there's that call out that liquid oxygen loading is now complete on the second stage. Now that means that propellant loading is complete on Falcon 9. And that's over 1.1 million pounds of propellants now loaded on the vehicle. All systems remain go for launch. SpaceX ground computers are now draining propellant out of the lines that go up to the strong back onto the second stage. And there you can see that venting happening there on your screen. Now this creates a white cloud, which is pressure from the ultra-cold liquid oxygen line that's being vented there.
Strong gas closeouts.
And again, when that cold liquid oxygen gas meets the warmer ambient air there, it creates that condensation that you can see there on your screen. Now, the first and second stage computers on Falcon 9 will execute stored programs to prepare the rocket for flight, leading to the ignition of the M1D engines at T-minus 2 seconds and liftoff at T-minus 0.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call out, the Falcon computers are running the final sequence for launch. First and second stage tanks are beginning final pressurization for launch. All systems are go. Let's listen in to terminal count.
LD, go for launch.
As Falcon 9 transports the European Space Agency's Hera spacecraft into space.
Thirty seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition, engines full power, and liftoff. Go Hera, go Falcon, go SpaceX.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T plus 30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 40. After clearing the tower, we begin to tilt or gimbal the engines. That initiates a roll maneuver you might see on the Stage 1 camera view, although it's kind of cloudy. But this enables the vehicle's antennas to stay in the best position for communicating with the ground. We are into throttle down now in preparation for max dynamic aero.
Falcon is supersonic.
Faster than a speeding bullet, we're supersonic on Falcon 9. Waiting for the call out from GNC of Max Q.
Max Q.
Right on time. We're through the period of maximum pressure on the vehicle. The Merlin engines are back at power, and we're out of the throttle bucket. Now, from here on, even though the velocity is rapidly increasing, the atmospheric density is decreasing, and that's resulting on less loads on the Falcon 9. 90 seconds into flight, the rocket typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid gravity pulling it back down to Earth and getting into orbit. We've heard the call out for MVAC chill. That's a bleed valve on the second stage engine. That's performing the final chill prior to second stage engine ignition. All's looking good with the first stage trajectory. We're coming up on T plus 2 minutes. Views from onboard the camera mounted on the inner stage of Booster 1061. Now we've got 3 events that'll be coming up in just under 30 seconds. Main engine cutoff, the 9 Merlin engines will be throttled down and shut down. Then we'll get stage separation and then startup of the MVAC engine on its first of 2 burns on the second stage. We've begun throttling down the Merlin engines.
Main engine cutoff.
Call for MECO.
Stage separation.
Successful stage separation.
MVAC ignition.
MVAC ignition and we're up on power on stage 2. Coming up will be fairing deployment. And for the first stage, as we saw it in the background, farewell 1061, and we thank you. As we continue climbing out of Earth's atmosphere, we're waiting for the right time when we can open up and deploy the fairing. That should be coming up in about 10 seconds. There's a camera view as we switch. You can see Hera inside the 2 halves of the fairing.
Fairing separation.
And successful payload fairing separation. As we mentioned earlier, the fairing halves have supported multiple missions. One half has flown 12, now 13 missions, and the other had previously flown 18. And those fairing halves will come back down to Earth. They're guided by cold gas thrusters and then parachutes or parafoils.
Falcon is on a nominal trajectory.
They'll deploy, and they'll be recovered by our recovery vessel, Doug. Jesse, T plus 4 minutes, 23 seconds. Everything continues to look good on Falcon 9 with Hera.
Thanks, John. Yeah, everything's looking great. We got some awesome views here on your screen. What you're looking at is a view of the MVAC engine on the second stage with a beautiful view of Earth in the background.
STS has safed.
Now, we are currently in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns for this spacecraft. And we have separated from the first stage. As we mentioned earlier, we will not be recovering the booster as we usually do. Now, typically we would land the booster either on a drone ship or back on land, but due to the additional performance required to deliver this payload to an interplanetary transfer orbit, we will be not recovering the booster today. Now what you are seeing, again, is the MVAC engine. The MVAC engine is optimized for the vacuum of space and has about 220,000 pounds of thrust in vacuum. Again, this is the first of 2 burns. The 2 burns for the MVAC engine will take the second stage with the payload attached to the targeted drop-off orbit.
Falcon continues to follow a nominal trajectory.
And great call out there, following a nominal trajectory. You can also follow along with the speed of the vehicle as well as the altitude in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And the next event coming up in about a minute and a half from now is SECO 1. SECO 1 is second stage engine cutoff 1, which is where we will shut down that MVAC engine and allow the vehicle to coast with the payload in an Earth orbit, and then we'll reignite that MVAC engine for a second time to take the vehicle and payload to that interplanetary transfer orbit. Now we're just about a minute away from SECO 1. And you can see in the bottom right hand of your screen that the speed is continuing to pick up. The velocity is increasing on the vehicle as the MVAC engine continues to burn. But again, in about 40 seconds from now.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
In about 35 seconds from now, we will shut down that MVAC engine and again allow the vehicle to coast in an Earth orbit before we make its way to the interplanetary transfer orbit.
Stage 2, SDS says safe.
Continuing to get good callouts and some great views here. Again, this is from the second stage looking at the MVAC engine. The Hera payload is still attached.
MVAC shut down.
Nominal park orbit insertion.
And great news. We heard the callouts as well as saw that MVAC engine shut down, and we got a good confirmation of nominal orbital insertion. Now, the second stage is now embarking on the first portion of its coast phase. Coasting in this orbit will last about 45 minutes, and we will light that MVAC engine for a second time around T plus 52 minutes. So we're going to take a pause, and we'll see you back here at T plus 52 minutes for SES-2. Welcome back to the webcast of the Falcon 9 mission carrying the Hera spacecraft for the European Space Agency. Now, the second stage completed the first burn, placing Falcon 9 and the Hera spacecraft into the desired orbit about 3 minutes ago after launch. Now, we are approaching the second burn of the engine to carry Falcon 9 and Hera to the orbit needed to deploy the spacecraft. Now, coming up here in a few seconds should be
MVAC ignition.
And right on time, SES-2. That call out was for second stage engine start. Now this burn is planned to last about a minute and a half. And we got a great view of that MVAC engine burning very bright there. Now during this time, we will be adding 4,500 kilometers per second to our velocity. And again, on the bottom right hand of your screen, you can see the speed increasing rapidly there, and you can also see the altitude of the vehicle and the payload. Now this is the second burn for this mission. There are 2 planned burns for this payload to be dropped into an interplanetary orbit. So that first burn took us into an Earth orbit, and now this second burn that's currently happening right now is taking the vehicle and the payload to that interplanetary orbit where the Hera spacecraft will be deployed. Now we're just about 30 seconds away from the conclusion of SES-2, which will be SECO-2, that second stage engine cutoff 2. And then we will shut down that MVAC engine, allow the vehicle to coast for a little bit prior to the deployment of the payload. Now SECO-2 is coming up here in just a few seconds.
MVAC shut down.
We did have SECO-2, just waiting for confirmation of a good orbit. There you can see on your screen the MVAC engine has shut down. And the Hera payload there on your screen still attached to Falcon 9. If you're just now joining us, we did have 2 completed burns for that MVAC engine. Just about a minute ago, we had SECO-2 where that second stage engine did cut off, and you can see that there, no longer firing. And we do still have the Hera payload still attached to Falcon 9.
We were waiting to hear the guidance nav control officer call out a good burn. I think they may have been stepped on. We're looking at the data and we've heard the background chatter. We do have confirmation.
Nominal burn 2.
There we
Good
go.
orbit.
The chief engineer has confirmed we have a good second burn of the MVAC engine. So that means the Falcon 9 second stage, with the Hera payload still attached, has escaped Earth velocity. So we're no longer orbiting the Earth. We're now orbiting the sun. We've got one more major activity remaining in this launch mission, and that's the spacecraft deployment. You can see the Hera spacecraft right there, still attached to Falcon 9 second stage. That's expected to occur at T plus 1 hour and 16 minutes. So we've still got another 20 minutes, which means we're going to take a short break. And we'll see you back here at T plus 1 hour and 15 minutes for spacecraft deployment. Welcome back to our launch coverage of the Hera mission for the European Space Agency. If you're just joining us, we had an on-time launch at 10:52 a.m. Eastern. We were able to get the weather to cooperate. We had a successful ascent, stage separation. We've had the 2 burns of the second stage engine. We've got one more major milestone coming up to complete today's mission, which of course is the deployment of the Hera spacecraft from Falcon 9's second stage. That's going to happen just over 30 seconds from now. And you may have noticed when we shut down the engine at the end of the second burn, we were 204 kilometers, a little more than 120 miles above the Earth. If you look at the display on the bottom right of your screen, we've just crossed 7,400 kilometers as we continue to head out into deep space as we have exceeded the velocity to escape from Earth. But right now, let's listen to hear the call out and watch for separation of Hera from the second stage.
Hera separation confirmed.
Great view. We've got successful deployment of the Hera spacecraft.
And with successful payload deploy, that brings our webcast to a close. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 389th overall mission to date and 94th mission of this year. Thank you to the European Space Agency for entrusting us with today's mission, as well as the range for their support. For continuing coverage of the mission, check out @ESA on X. And for continued updates on all of our missions, follow @SpaceX on X and spacex.com/launches. Thank you to all of our viewers for joining us this morning, and we'll see you again soon.